Hi, everyone, and welcome to 7 Secrets to Achieve Universal Zero Trust Network Access. Today's webinar is sponsored by Zscaler and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward, and I am with Actual Tech Media, as you might have imagined. And I'm truly excited to be your moderator for this event, which couldn't possibly be any more timely. But before we get to that, I need to cover some housekeeping items that you do need to know about. First of all, take a look at that questions box in your webinar control panel. Now, at the end of today's presentation, we'll have a dedicated Q&A session covering your questions, so keep those coming throughout the event. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. If you do have any problems hearing or seeing us, seeing the screen, try a browser refresh. That should be your first option here, and that should fix most of the problems that you have. If that doesn't work, let us know in that Q&A box, and we will provide further technical assistance. All right, next, take a look at the handouts section of your webinar control panel, which is right there next to the questions tab. There you will find a metric ton of great stuff, including 3 amazing assets from Zscaler. They've provided a 2023 VPN risk report, a guide to securing your hybrid workforce, and a white paper about how to implement zero trust access to private apps from inside and outside the office. I mean, that is just a lot of goodness. So I encourage you to download those handouts now. Other resources you will find in the handouts section include a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's huge library of books on technology topics. You'll also find a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events, probably some that might interest you. If you see something you like, go ahead and sign up today for that. All right, third, at the end of this webinar, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one of you. Now, you do have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can also be found in the handouts section. If you're into really boring stuff, go ahead and look that over. Finally, before we get started, one of the best benefits of this or any actual tech event is the opportunity to ask questions of our expert presenters, as I mentioned earlier. Now, to help encourage those questions, we have another additional prize for you to whet your appetite, and that is a second Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event is over, we will take all the questions that came in, pick out what we feel is the very best one, and contact that winner for the prize. And with that stuff out of the way, why don't we get to the main event? I am truly honored to introduce you today to our presenter, Mike Ruiz. Mike is a consulting engineer with Zscaler. Mike, you ready to go?
I certainly am, Keith. Thanks for the exciting introduction and the awesome prizes.
Glad to hear it. Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, you were not eligible to win any of the prizes. Sorry about that. Maybe next time, right, when you're attending.
That's all right. I know there's a whole bunch of people in the room virtually. To have
Yeah,
one of our
absolutely.
friends win both of them.
So I'm going to
Excellent.
hand the mic over to you. I'm going to get out of here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As always, thanks everyone for attending. My name is Mike Ruiz. I'm a consulting sales engineer at Zscaler. I'm in my 9th year at Zscaler delivering zero trust solutions. So we've been doing zero trust before anybody called it zero trust. I'm pretty excited to say that. I know you're all here today, though, to find out what the 7 secrets of success are to achieve a universal zero trust network access. I'll explain what the universal means in just a little bit. If you stick around to the end, not only do you get to win prizes, but I might have an 8th bonus secret at the end. So just for folks here today. So we're going to cover a lot of different areas today, but I think they boil down into sort of 3 topics, right? Talking about what the building blocks are to either zero trust application access or zero trust network access. You'll hear some of these phrases used interchangeably. So I'd like to talk also about what zero trust network access actually means and some of the different ways we can use these blocks to build some exciting solutions that help administrators, help security practitioners, and help users with user experience. We'll talk about some best practices also. I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of zero trust deployments and definitely learned some best practices firsthand. And I've definitely taken some great feedback from the thousands and thousands of Zscaler customers out there who've done this. Hopefully some of you are, some Zscaler customers are attending the webinar here also. So feel free in the Q&A, not just to ask questions, but if you have an amazing anecdote to share, throw it in there as well. And we'll try to mention it as we get towards the end here. So I think there's a lot of reasons people are looking at zero trust in the world today. And some of these are probably not going to be surprising, but I think it's worth setting the stage. Right? Hybrid work is just a reality at this point, right? Coming out of COVID, certainly during COVID, everybody or almost everybody was working remotely. But coming out of COVID, I think hybrid work is here to stay, right? Employees want the flexibility of working remotely, working in the office, or working from different offices even. I'm presenting to you live today from the new Zscaler office in New York City. It is not my home Zscaler office, but I came down to spend some time with customers and see some colleagues. So I'm a hybrid worker right now, right here with you. So as we look to the future, though, and think about hybrid work, we have to realize that return to the office is gradually becoming a reality. That presents some unique challenges out there, right? Offices may have been shut down. Offices may not have the capacity for people to be there, or maybe it's even bandwidth capacity, private bandwidth, internet bandwidth. Certainly costs are going up for internet, MPLS, you name it. And I think one more thing we all absolutely agree is that cyber threats aren't going anywhere. Certainly the vulnerabilities and the exploits shift a little bit here and there and how they're targeting folks. But reality is cyber threats are here to stay and we need to be prepared for those. So Gartner's always an interesting data point for me, right? They gather so much information from so many different sources. And just this year, I don't know what month it was, but I know it was this year, they did an analysis saying more than half of workers out there want flexible hybrid work. Our job is to provide security while balancing user experience, right? We need to be flexible. Our users are working from anywhere. Yes, I need to make sure that they have a great user experience while doing that, but it absolutely, absolutely has to have top-notch security on it. And zero trust is one of the ways that the world has been moving towards providing that flexibility and security at the same time. So why don't we shift for a minute here and talk a little bit about what zero trust means? And I think the best way to talk about zero trust is sort of contrast it a little bit to what the traditional world looks like for network and security. So hopefully the picture you see on the screen right now is a rough approximation of a traditional sort of network firewall-centric design. This is a very hub and spoke type design. You guys might be in a slightly more meshed environment out there, but effectively this is about the same. You'll see we have a bunch of different types of users and different types of locations represented by the little gray circles, and we've got firewalls in the data centers in the middle there. We've got some cloud data centers up along the top with virtual firewalls in there. And everything has some sort of connectivity back to those data centers and up to the internet. That connectivity might be provided by traditional routers, SD-WAN, firewalls, what have you. It might be commodity internet. It might be MPLS. There's probably some traditional VPN in there as well. Maybe some generic IPsec. All though ultimately providing capacity just back to the data centers. What we've really done in this picture over the past, decades of evolution is build this giant routed environment. Now, I suspect everybody on the call has some sort of segmentation going on with firewalls in their environment. But reality is, what we've done is extend this routed connectivity to all of these different locations, to our branch offices, our factories, our headquarters, our data centers, our public clouds. Firewalls can't block everything or nobody would be able to do anything. And we've exposed a whole bunch through those firewalls to the internet so that things like VPN can work, creating this giant attack surface out there. Ultimately, we're at a point now where we're evolving past that into what is called a zero trust architecture. And zero trust, when I hear that, a lot of times I think, just like a lot of you probably do, of accessing private applications in data centers, physical data centers, colos, public cloud data centers. I think of things like VPN replacement. But reality is zero trust can fit into any connection to any application anywhere, to applications that live on the internet, SaaS applications, to private applications in the data center. And it doesn't have to just be users going to applications. It could be workloads, servers talking to each other. It could be IoT and OT devices talking to applications. So zero trust is broadly applicable. But what's different about zero trust, aside from the fact that the picture looks a little bit simpler, is that no matter which compliance framework for zero trust you look at, maybe you like CISA, maybe you like the NIST zero trust framework out there, there's several of them. They all have at least one thing in common. And that is that you must either proxy or broker, they use those terms interchangeably, all traffic. What does that mean? That means whatever the user wants to talk to, and I'll focus on users talking to private apps just for keeping the conversation simple in a webinar here. Whenever a user needs to talk to a private application, there must be something terminating that connection, brokering that connection, proxying that connection between the user and the application. Well, why? The whole point of zero trust is to keep users off the network. Users should never talk to the resource network directly. They just need to talk to the application, right? You'll hear things like NIST calls it limiting the blast radius or minimizing lateral movement. But from a high level, what I like to think about is users talk to apps without getting access to the network, and a business policy decides who can access what application. So things like user identity, group membership, department information, things that live in your Active Directory, your LDAP, your identity provider, in combination with maybe some identity parameters about your device, like your device posture, decide what applications you can access. And that connectivity to get the information to and from those applications is proxied so that you're never able to get to things you shouldn't. So I'm going to pause just for a second and throw a little bit of a poll up on the screen here. Given what we've talked about, zero trust access, business policy, and minimizing lateral movement, is that approach to zero trust something that you've thought about in your organization currently? So a lot of organizations are probably going to say yes, I'm guessing. I see the results starting to come in. Probably going to say yes, but we're somewhere along that journey. We're not at the end. And applause to that. I love it. Some are going to say yes. Hey, we're mid-journey. We've already begun to roll this out. Mid-journey could mean a lot of things. No, hey, we aren't quite there yet for whatever reason. I promise I'm not going to ask you what it is on the call. All right, so I see we've got a bunch of answers in here, and if I can manage to click the right button, let's see what we got for results. So 47%, yes, we have plans, but are in the early phases. I promise you that even in this room, without knowing who's here, you are in good company. I talk to customers almost every day of the week, and this is where the vast majority fall. We're just starting to do this. We've maybe got a few things that we're deploying already, but a lot is in these sort of understanding, planning, architecture stages. 21% of you are in the we're rolling out. Awesome, that's great. There's some awesome Zscaler reference customers out there that you can talk to who are substantially into the maturity phase of this journey. And I'm sure they're excited to share that information with you and share their journey, the good and the bad. No, we have no plans to adopt a zero trust model yet. The operative word in that question is yet, right? That's the ultimate out. We know it's out there. We're not quite there yet. Hopefully by the end of this, we've planted some seeds and we can talk about some interesting next steps that will help your users and help your administrators and increase your security posture. At the beginning of the conversation, I mentioned, and if you were paying very, very close attention, you caught it. I talked about sort of extending the definition of zero trust. I talked about universal zero trust. And I'd like to share a little bit about what I mean by that, because I try to avoid sort of putting the marketing framework around zero trust, which has specific definitions in the industry today, right? We talked about minimizing attack surface, preventing lateral movement, that kind of thing. When I say universal zero trust, primarily what I'm talking about is what do we do when a user comes on-prem inside that traditional perimeter, right? Inside the moat, into the castle, if you will, where often a lot of security has traditionally been turned off or reduced because you're inside that routed environment. You could just get to things. Well, I submit from a user perspective, anything that changes the user experience makes their life more difficult. I hear terms like user abrasion or user friction. Whenever they have to know how to do something differently, turn on and off a VPN client, right? Authenticate a different way. That makes their life, makes their job harder to do. So I submit that when you do zero trust, as you get into the later stages of the journey especially, you should be able to use those same tools, those same building blocks to create the same secure user experience, whether they're on-prem or off-prem. As a matter of fact, the concept of on-prem and off-prem gradually starts to become very blurry and might even go away. So we'll talk a little bit later about, some of the ways that we're addressing this, but you could probably guess that, you could see in the sort of number 2 there, the in-office users, that little blue Zscaler zCloud on-prem. We can extend what we call the Zscaler Zero Trust Exchange into your offices where you have these high-speed private networks so that you can deliver the exact same zero trust experience on-prem or off-prem. But the meat of what you're getting for, now that we've set a little bit of the stage, the meat of what you're here for are the 7 or maybe 8 secrets. You have to hang out until the end to find the 8th secret. So let's jump right in. Secret number 1. I should have done this like in the old top 10 list format and had music and stuff, but we'll go with this. So secret number 1, discover known and unknown apps and segments. I love discovering unknown things. That's important. And segment, right? Segmentation is a word that gets a lot of play out there, and you're going to hear me say it throughout. And that's, how do I keep things isolated from each other? Again, back to that blast radius. Keep them completely separate from each other so that they can't interfere with each other, affect each other, attack each other. So what do I mean by discover known and unknown apps? Well, let's maybe break it down a little bit, right? I love making lists of things. So there's sort of 3 categories of discovered applications. Things you need to lock down, right? I hear these called crown jewel applications first. A former CIO that I know from a very large corporation is very fond of telling a story when his company decided they were going to create their crown jewel app list. And they realized that you cannot put every app and every server and every asset on your crown jewel app list or you can protect nothing. You have to have a sort of small list of things that if they're compromised, breached, stolen, ransomware, have a fundamental impact on your existence as a business. That's your crown jewel list. So when you know what those things are, you can build policies around them. Secondly, we have something in Zscaler parlance we call the wild card. You could think of this as maybe subnets that broadly people probably have things in they need to access. Or you could think of them as, for the technical folks, like a DNS zone. I'll say, star.servers.company.internal, where they're going to access things in a namespace. And that star means, hey, whatever's in that namespace. You can broadly give access to things and still remember, keep that proxy, keep that zero trust model in there to discover what people are doing. I promise you, not only are you in good company with your peers in the conversation here, and hopefully that's going on in the Q&A session in the background, you are in good company if you don't know every app and everything about every app that every employee is using. There are going to be lots of apps out there that you find out about while you're running in this discovery mode. And that's what I like to call things you don't know. What do we do with them? Well, guess what? Zscaler's Private Access, our zero trust solution to getting to private apps, you might see it referred to as ZPA, Zscaler Private Access, in later slides, gives you logs and graphs, giving you the ability to drill into user activity, find out what these apps are, where these apps are, how users are getting to these apps, to further refine your policy, right? To allow, to block, or to optimize maybe how they get to them. So there's a bunch of ways to sort of create these segments or groups of applications, and the way they get isolated from each other we'll talk about in a second, right? So on the left, list your critical applications. We talked about that. Figure out what your crown jewels are. You may need to ask some application owners about it, but I want to table ask your app owners for a second. The blue one in the middle, the blue circle in the middle, let ZPA discover your applications. This is what I was just referring to with these wildcards, with that star dot name idea, or a subnet-based way to give folks access to a broad swath of internal applications. Let Zscaler Private Access watch what your users are doing and catalog it for you, right? See what they're doing and let you decide then, as the administrator, what you want to do with it. You will get catalogs of who's accessing which applications. There might even be multiple applications on a server. You can then get granular and decide what users, what groups, what departments. Pick an attribute from your Active Directory, LDAP, or identity provider that you want to use to create user-focused granularity. And as a last resort, you should really never have to ask the application owners how their app works, right? What are the dependencies? What ports and protocols do they use? What IPs, what DNS names? You'll get a lot of that from this ongoing logging and reporting and cataloging, but you should feel free and build those connections if they don't already exist with other teams to ask the app owners things that you might just not be able to technically discover on the fly. After you segment things, it should look roughly like this. Now, at first glance, even when I saw this diagram, it looked a little bit like VPN to me. And that's good. There should be some familiarity here. I've got users on the left and I've got applications on the right. Between the users and those little two blue plug icons called app connectors, I see some things that look like tunnels. So it's reasonably understandable in sort of traditional terms that there's tunnels and users accessing apps. But when we dig into the next level here, there's a couple little subtleties here. So first off, you'll notice that users are only talking to the Zscaler Zero Trust Exchange. Users only ever talk to Zscaler's platform. The platform and those two little blue plug icons build connections to each other. Those plug icons are what we call app connectors. And those app connectors only ever talk outbound from your data centers, your public cloud data centers, what have you, your colos. They only ever talk outbound to the Zscaler Zero Trust Exchange. That means they're not exposed to the internet inbound through your firewall. There's no inbound NAT. There's no inbound holes with ports and protocols opened up. They reach outbound and they're building tunnels to the Zscaler Zero Trust Exchange. And now the users are able to send traffic to those app connectors. And I wish we were in a room together because I would shout out, based on what we said earlier, what are those app connectors? Those app connectors are proxies. They are terminating those tunnels. They are terminating that purple, that green, and that orangish application traffic inside those tunnels. They are terminating it there. And they are initiating a new connection to each of the apps. And those are the policy enforcement point, to steal a NIST term from the NIST Zero Trust framework. So that purple application traffic that's going to legal is terminated at an application connector. And that traffic, if it's allowed, based on user and device identity parameters, is sent to legal or to travel or to IT. And if the purple legal user wants to talk to the dark blue, is it? Black, blue finance application, they don't even know it exists. If they send traffic to it, that proxy goes, hey, you're not authorized. That traffic it's gone. So that lateral movement is also managed and controlled by that policy enforcement point at the app connectors, by that proxy or broker function. Secret number 2, build more granularity into your access policies. Wildcards are wonderful. Wildcards are going to help you document your environment and learn what you want to build policy around, but then you want to get more granular. Getting more granular can take a lot of thought, right? You can look at who's accessing what, or you can look at the applications and maybe look at things like the AD groups or SAML groups that are used to allow access to them to figure out what needs to be accessed by whom. I don't know about you. I don't like being a human log parser. I want to do that as a last resort. So in the Zscaler platform, there's the 2 big buzz letters of the industry today. There's an AI engine, a machine learning model that will look at access patterns in these logs and start making intelligent recommendations based on the applications and the names of the apps and maybe the departments that they're in your identity provider, and start to say, hey, I think you can group these and create restrictions here, and you need broad allowances here. So you're not stuck doing this on your own. And certainly, Zscaler and our partners all have services to help with that as well. But there are amazing tools built into the Zero Trust Zscaler Private Access platform, and you're going to use all of these. It's important to have a lot of building blocks out there. So third, this is what makes Zero Trust more universal. It needs to work on-prem, not just for road warriors. As a matter of fact, I'd even go further than this, but you can only have so many secrets in a webinar, right? Not only should it work on-prem, it should work for things other than users. It should work for servers talking to servers, IoT things that need to talk to servers, you name it. But ultimately, you need a unified set of tools. And Zscaler Private Access does this today, that work in this sort of hybrid environment world we've created. So those same Zscaler tools, if you're either in a headquarters that's got a data center in it, or you're on the other end of one of those nice high-speed private MPLS links that you're keeping, whether people are telling you it's too expensive or not, you can use Zero Trust principles. You can use Zscaler Private Access to have the same user experience, the same Zero Trust security, and the same administration experience for on-prem as well. So not only have I made it more secure, not only have I made it unified and simple for your users, but the administrators who have to configure all this don't need to do different things or have a million different teams involved for on-prem and off-prem. One of my favorite things, right? I keep talking about extending Zero Trust in different scenarios. And what I've discovered, third-party users, contractors, BYOD, this could even extend to like mergers and acquisitions, etc., are often sort of these corner cases where special things are done to get them access, right? You can't always give somebody the traditional VPN client if they're a third-party contractor. Maybe you are merging with a new company that you're acquiring, and you're not interconnecting those 2 networks until everybody's at the same level of security. Well, Zscaler Private Access and Zero Trust can help with that. You could certainly give them an endpoint agent for all of this. That's great. But if you can't do that, built into the platform, same tools, same building blocks, browser-based access to private applications, right within their web browser, without agents, without dissolvable agents. They can access applications that are web-based, HTTP, HTTPS, RDP-based, SSH-based, VNC-based. One of the common things I see for third-party contractors out there is building these large virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI farms, because not only do I want to give them access, but I want to put an extra layer of security around it. Maybe I don't want them uploading or downloading, copy pasting, printing, controlled data residency. Built into our browser-based access platform is the idea of a cloud browser isolation, an almost air-gapped like browser that runs in the cloud and only streams pixels like VDI does. Not necessarily a complete VDI replacement. Handle 50% or 80% of those use cases without building out large alternative infrastructure makes life a lot easier for everybody. And of course, maybe you don't have everybody in the same IDP. Maybe your employees are in ADFS or Microsoft Azure, Entra ID, I believe the new name is. But your contractors you keep in Okta. The platform supports multiple identity providers. There's no excuse for letting your third-party users, M&A companies, etc., contractors, to bypass security because we can build the same tools and the similar user experience for them. We get into the more mature phases and we start to think about things like where you might find web application firewalls or IPSs, right? Screening or inspecting traffic for threats. And conveniently, right? And this doesn't just extend to sort of to traditional application attacks or server attacks. It could also focus on user-based inspection like DLP, data loss prevention, etc. But more often than not, folks think about the server-side attack, the IPS WAF type functionality. There's built-in profiles for all of the major types of attacks out there, especially against websites, web servers, etc., although it will go beyond that. There's pre-built policies in here that you can turn on to provide that functionality and protect your applications and protect your servers. You can also make custom signatures. So as we get towards the end and towards the Q&A session, and most importantly, the prizes, there's a few more things I think worth touching on. Deception, active defense, the area where you would traditionally hear things like honeypots and lures and decoys and breadcrumbs, and an area that's traditionally been very challenging to deploy in a way that is actionable, right? It's easy to spin up honeypots. It's hard to monitor them and take action on them. And again, I don't like being a human log parser. I don't want to say, oh, this honeypot got attacked. I'm deciding how credible that attack is. Is it intentional or unintentional? I want to build lures and decoys and breadcrumbs and honeypots and traps right into the system so that I don't have to try to build connections and correlations, right? So that it does it for me. So with Zscaler Private Access, there is nothing additional to deploy to build in an active defense layer, a deception layer into your environment. You can have endpoint breadcrumbs of a wide range of types. You can have internet-facing decoys. You can have internal on your resource networks, land-side decoys, honeypots in your environment without deploying any additional infrastructure, right? This is part of the Zscaler cloud platform, the Zero Trust Exchange, and ZPA in particular, although it does go beyond Zscaler Private Access. So I don't want to put any more endpoint agents out there, right? I want to make sure that whatever footprint I have out there is building all of the information out that I need from an active defense perspective, so that if somebody touches one of these decoys, it's a very high fidelity, high confidence alert that something inappropriate is happening. And the system can natively take action. You decide what the action is. It might be complete containment, right? It might be, hey, I'm shutting them off from internet. I'm shutting them off from private app access. They can get to the web page that gives them the phone number to call, right? Something like that. It could also do containment outside of native containment. So what do I mean? It can communicate with other security tools in your environment, not just your SIMs and SOARs, but where you still have perimeter firewalls, et cetera, or other security tools that might take different actions or might block certain traffic. It can reach out and communicate with them as well. This is part of the defense in-depth story. So I think one of the most important things in any project, though, is that it iterates. there's care and feeding, there's continuous monitoring that needs to go on. And ultimately, that needs to be a mix of human intervention, and it should have a certain amount of automation to it, right? My favorite phrase, I swear, this week has been, I don't want to be a human log parser. I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record on that, but I don't. I want to look at meaningful dashboards and reports that let me make decisions if I want to manually take action. It might be a list of, hey, my animation is working, just what applications have been most recently accessed, and I can set a time frame filter. Or show me applications that have been discovered in the last 14 days, right? Just a quick way to go back. Show me my top applications by users so that I can make decisions on the fly. Most importantly, remember, especially when it comes to things like applications and users and groups and departments, that kind of thing, the AI, that machine learning model, is running behind the scenes constantly, not just during your deployment phase, but as you go throughout this journey, it's always monitoring what users are doing, whether they're allowed or blocked, right? Back to that wildcard idea. Even if you're blocking users, the machine learning model and the AI can say, ooh, you might need to open this for them, or you might be able to be more granular here. So we want to support that iteration, that continuous care and feeding and monitoring to maintain a very granular zero trust environment over time. And I also want to look at what's going on the compromise side of the house. The active defense piece that we just spoke about, yes, that's continuing to operate. And if you have a team who's ever done that before, they'll tell you, right? Periodically, you update the look and feel of the different decoys and honeypots that are out there, right? There's wizards and walkthroughs for that there. But there's reports you can look at within the Zscaler Private Access system that also look at that application protection, application inspection angle, whether it's, again, the pre-built policies, signatures that are out there, whether they're provided by our Threat Labs security research team or they're custom. You can look at these reports, and based on different signs of compromise, what's being attacked, you can adjust your policies if you need to, if you choose to as well. So before I get to next steps, I promised a bonus number 8 secret. And so in my 9th year here at Zscaler, I have seen a lot of customers, large and small, all over the world. And one thing I've discovered is that there are some things that are common at every customer. And there's some things that create a unique environment. This is the 8th secret, right? What's common across us is probably more numerous than what makes us unique. But I think the thing that makes us most unique is how we use these building blocks that we've just spent the past 30 minutes or so talking about, right? How we use them to build something unique for our environment. Everybody's journey may be not in this order of 7 things that we talked about. Deception might be very early for some of you, or server to server, zero trust, right? You can use these building blocks in whatever order. And that gives me a nice segue to my recommended next step here, right? We can only cover so much in a one-to-many virtual environment, even with a Q&A session here. Reach out to Zscaler using the link below. I believe it's linked in the handouts or slide here as well. And we can do a virtual or potentially even a face-to-face architecture session where we can start to tune this transformation journey to your unique needs. And with that, Keith, I'd like to hand it back over to you because I believe we are about to get to some Q&A out there.
And indeed we are. How did you know that was coming up, Mike? Hey,
I had a sneaky suspicion.
Great presentation. I love lists. I have to say, Mike, I was a little discouraged that there were a number of people when you asked the poll question who's like, we're not interested in zero trust. I hope that by the end of this event today, that number will be 0 after everyone sees the benefits of zero trust. And in my mind, if you're asking me, it seems it's the mindset that in this day and age with ransomware and all the cyber threats, how can you not start moving to that mindset, to that new paradigm? Otherwise, you're just leaving yourself wide open for everything.
Keith, I think one of the reasons, not to delay the Q&A here, is I think one of the reasons that's pretty common out there is people think it's difficult.
Hmm.
And hopefully you see with some of these building blocks, you can start that journey with very light lift, and then gradually grow into it. Every little bit of help, helping your administrators have an easier day, helping your users have a better experience, and actual technology that increases your security posture, every little bit helps on that journey.
100%. So let's dive into some questions then. In fact, there's a question that relates to what we were just talking about. Someone wants to know, how steep is the learning curve with Zscaler? Obviously it's SaaS, so you would think that
Yeah.
minimizes it. What's your sense of how hard is it to get started?
One of the things I'm been saying for a very, very long time is that we're not taking anybody's job away, right? And the reason I say that, right? People think I'm trying to, get rid of your firewall person or get rid of your IPS person or your VPN person. No, all of those skills transfer incredibly well to Zero Trust into Zscaler's platform, internet access, private access, etc. If you understand how routing works or how firewalls work or whatever your area of expertise is, you will find very familiar pieces here. The application flow, it's usually, one or two whiteboard sessions I do with folks to help them understand the application flow and how the packets flow. And you can tell when that light goes off, it happens at, different amount of time for everybody. There's also a ton of free Zscaler training open out there. So we make it pretty easy for folks to onboard. Plus professional services, partner services, managed services, whatever the right mix is, we'll make it as easy as you want it to be.
Great. Okay, here's a very important question that a lot of folks, I'm sure, have. So, which features differentiate ZTNA? I assume we mean Zero Trust Network Access or something close to that from a standard VPN.
Oh, goodness gracious. So the two most important that come to mind, and there's probably a bit of a laundry list, but the two most important that come to mind is with ZPA, Zscaler Private Access, you don't need an internet facing listener. There is no presence on the internet for somebody to attack. Your VPN, pick any VPN on the planet, right, has to have an IP and a port open on the internet. And that's there for somebody to attack because somebody has to be able to connect to it to authenticate. Zscaler Private Access, I briefly mentioned it only, right? Only talks outbound from your sites to the Zscaler cloud. That eliminates that inbound attack surface. So huge advantage right there over over VPN before anybody does anything. The second one is get the users off the network, right? The users don't even get an IP address in the data center or in the DMZ. There's no layer 3 routing from the user into the resource network. That is a huge, huge advantage from a lateral movement perspective. And lateral movement, we all know, is one of the worst things that happen, especially as you mentioned in this day and age of ransomware. So those two things right out of the chute. You will be astonished at the amount of logging and visibility you get compared to VPN, pretty much any VPN product out there as well. I've managed several of them in past lives. So I think you'll find it pretty exciting across the board. I can't remember another time in history, really, where the administrative experience, the security posture, and the user experience all got better.
Right.
Who likes VPN anyway?
The lateral movement you mentioned, I mean, for when an attacker gets that and can do that, that's kind of like getting bingo, right? If you're the attacker,
Mm-hmm.
once you get there, you can get pretty much anywhere on the network. So
Very
crucial
often the goal.
to keep
Yep.
an eye on that. 100%. Okay. So here's one that sounds like it might be coming from experience from one of our attendees. So they might have had this happen. How do you
Excellent.
deal with compromised credentials that let an attacker onto a device?
Yeah. So this is, I think, partly where defense in depth is very, very important, right? So if you had an active defense layer, you might have gotten a compromised credential hit on some fake credentials before somebody got real ones, and you could have acted on that sort of pre-breach. But this is also where things like application inspection come into play, that application protection. So remember I talked about sort of those WAF and IPS type functions. if somebody's got some compromised credentials and they're trying to attack an application that those credentials are authorized to access, well, you're going to log that they accessed it. But ultimately, I want to start looking at what they're trying to do to that application and catch them there. And certainly any attack, almost any attack anyway, usually has an exfiltration angle as well. So I talked about things like where data loss prevention, and I didn't really mention where user to internet type malware, IPS scanning, threat scanning comes into play, but that's all part of that story. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have time for like maybe one more question before we start to wrap up here. And I have one that is more of a general defense question than a Zscaler specific one, but one that I think a lot of people have. So Chris wants to know if honeypots are still a good lure out there, or are there better ones that have come out since then? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I might be a little biased in this, but I'll try to be a little bit generic here. So I come across lots of customers who have lots of different products deployed from a honeypot perspective. And they, especially if they're internet facing, they'll get hits in minutes of you putting it out there. How do you sift through the noise to find those high fidelity signals that are relevant to you and to your organization? I think that's the biggest challenge out there with traditional security products in general. By integrating it into the platform, right, that correlation makes it a lot easier. And especially if it's an endpoint hit or an internal hit, you know that that is a very high fidelity hit. If you put my honeypots out there and expose them to the internet, they're going to get attacks. But then the system will give you those tools, either it needs to automate or you to manually correlate them to find out if there's a corresponding sort of internal problem as a result of that external hit. So ultimately, this comes down to a lot of administrative experience in my mind, right? How do I make something actionable? I'd rather have a little bit less information and much higher fidelity personally. And by the way, I think it was Chris who asked that question. If you do an architecture session, there's some really, really excellent stories out there that we can share from some of our reference customers around that correlation from an internet-facing honeypot to a real actionable item.
So, and following up on that as well, I wanted to mention here that all the questions that have come in, we can't get to all of them today. Too many good ones. Great to see that interest in what you're doing. But there will be follow-up on all of these. So if your question doesn't get answered, don't worry. We will get back with you on that and answer any questions that you have. I also wanted to mention also before we wrap about the handouts again. Your company, Mike, provided us 3 fantastic handouts, downloads, things that are going to answer more questions and really give you a sense of what Zscaler can do for them. So I would strongly encourage in the couple of minutes that we have left that you go back to that handouts tab and download those as well. So Mike, it has been such a pleasure to have you on today talking about Zero Trust, a topic that couldn't possibly have more relevance in this day and age. And it's great to see what you're doing in that space, how you are innovating, and it's just been a delight to have you on today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks for inviting me to spend time with you.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure. And folks, with that, we are nearing the end of our event today. We have one more piece of business to do, and that is the Amazon gift card giveaway. This one is $250. As I mentioned at the beginning, you do have to be present during the entire event to win any of our prizes on our events. And we do have a winner for today. The winner of that gift card is Dale LeBlanc from Nevada. Congratulations to you, Dale. We will be in touch very soon to get you your card. And with that, everyone, we are wrapped now for this. On behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Mike and Zscaler for making this event possible. And I want to thank all of you attendees for being here, for your great questions, for your interest, for your answers in the poll question and everything else. Thank you for being here with us today. That concludes the event, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye now.